Hello everyone, this is a quick recap of our presentation, Broadening the Narrative from Confederate Monuments to Inclusive Unifying Public Spaces for the Town of Warrenton, North Carolina. So this project is really about the replacement of a Confederate monument, kind of in a nutshell, but more for us it was about how to create public space for a diversity of people that's expressive of a diversity of people and doesn't make folks feel like they don't belong. And how do you do that? We sought to do that through a four-step community engagement design process, or a four-step community design process that really can be used not just for the town of Warrenton. In this instance, we're using it for Warrenton, North Carolina, but really anyone. And the first step is to connect, the second step is to understand, the third step is to create, and the fourth step is to deliver. And the purpose is to design with and not just for a community. Oops. This really is drawn from the ladder of Ornstein's ladder of citizen participation, where on the top of the ladder you have citizen control and delegated power and partnership over the spaces that are created in their communities. And that just what this is really trying to indicate or visualize is when a designer comes into a community, at the bottom you would come in and just do what you want based on no real reference or connection with the community. On top, you have a designer that comes in, and through the entire process the community is engaged to make sure that in the end, hopefully, that you've created an inclusive public space that is expressive of the diversity of the richness of the community. So you guys know where we're located in Warrenton, North Carolina, just northeast of us in Greensboro, sharing a line with Virginia. This is the courthouse site. Again, we looked at initially the Confederate monument site that's on the overall parcel. We ended up expanding our design proposals to the entire lot that the courthouse sits on, and also across the street to that vacant piece that had burnt down of the building. There's a vacant lot here that we looked at, trying to activate through our designs as well. Again, expressing the monument being removed, and then the base being removed later on, and then what we currently have now, what we're looking at the church, with the courthouse rather, with the Confederate monument removed. So then the first part of the process, this is when the committee was formed, and the goals were to study the courthouse square site, to consider monument-based options, to coordinate community engagement, and to identify replacement options and make recommendations. And here's a picture of the fine folks of the committee sitting upon the base before it was removed. So the first part of this process was to connect, and this was done by the committee. The connection was made with the community through public meetings held in each of the 5 commissioner districts. In addition, a wonderful survey that was distributed that we built a lot of our designs from. And from that survey, what was expressed in the town was kind of a split, a dichotomy, a split between regret and cynicism and loss of the monument, and also folks who felt hopeful and like this was a progressive step towards a more unified future for the town. And what we were left with in the middle was trying to kind of reconcile these two different factions and to find a way to bring these folks together to create space that accommodates everyone as best we can. We looked at a lot of words that were pulled from the survey. And we created a word cloud, and the word cloud is just you pull words off of something, and the words that appear the most appear larger in the word cloud. So the idea of unity and hope and monument and transformation were really, really important, especially unity through our design process for most of our students. Then, as part of this kind of connection piece, the committee reached out to us here at North Carolina A&T State University, our program of landscape architecture, to kind of analyze the information and go through it and generate concepts for the space. In order to do that, we have to take a step back and understand what we're designing. And in this instance, we looked at the history of Warrenton, from when it was incorporated to it was named after, and also the history's connection to slavery and its economic abundance during the time of 1840 to 1860. And this timeline expresses that. You see kind of the foundation of Warrenton, and then at its peak population happening in 1860 compared to its population now in 2021 of 800 people rather. We also discovered that Warrenton is the birthplace of the environmental justice movement, which is really important not just for the town in North Carolina, but really for our nation. And this is really about creating equity for everyone and making sure that just because you don't have money and you are below the poverty level, that folks just don't put bad things that they wouldn't put in their backyard, in your backyard, that it would be harmful to your family or to your children. And we thought this was really, really, really important and should be celebrated, not just for the town of Warrenton, but really for, for all of us in our nation, to make sure that all folks are, as best we can, are taken care of, or try to move in that direction. So Warrenton today, we looked at the population, current population, the males and females, resident age, median income, and also the split between ethnicities or races as reported in the 2019 census. I'm looking at currently programmed events stepping through the space, and how the space is more than just really the courthouse. It truly is the public green and the main court, or the main park for the town of Warrenton, North Carolina. We also looked at Lake Gaston and Lake Herb being very important natural features of Warren County and of the people, and also how it expressed this kind of split dichotomy, because folks that have a lot of money tend to live along the water's edge, though it is a unifying feature and important aspect, cultural aspect, we felt, to all the folks that lived in Warren County. Then we dive deeper and kind of a more micro analysis of the site, looking at the archetype of the church, the different elements like the flagpoles that folks wanted to keep. We also looked at some of these old vestiges of segregation that still exist, the segregated water fountains, and this really in the historic troughs, and also the clock tower. The segregated water fountains also started a larger conversation about objects and cultural remembrance, and that object itself is not implicitly evil, though these were segregated water fountains. They didn't necessarily have to be. So it really started that conversation for us about the power of objects and the meaning of cultural history, and how things can be transformed or broadened to really expand that narrative. We also looked at the patterns that bind memorial in the backside of the courthouse. That was really important for us, this quilting history, the idea of these different pieces coming together to create something larger than the sum of their parts. And then also the idea of the memorial, the World War II memorial, and the detective memorial being very important pieces that exist on the site, and then the interactive art sculpture that also exists by the patterns that bind memorial. Looking at the historic slave auction bell that exists on the site, this was the green, the public green space for the town. It's been like that for a long, long time. So this is one of the spaces that slaves were historically sold, and we were told that from the cultural history of the town that this bell was rung to start and end the slave auction, in order to signify the selling of a slave, and we thought it was important to highlight that as part of this of our analysis. Across the street, we see the adjacent property, that piece that had burnt down and wanted to be reactivated to help tie back into the overall downtown master plan, revitalization plan of the town, looking at the historic light fixtures and trying to get a sense of archetype and architecture. Then this is an overview, kind of expressing all those analysis points and some more information, really the high and low points, and expressing that there's a low point down here on the site. Flow of water, looking at it's in a zone neighborhood business district. It's a humid tropical climate environment. And looking also at the red arrows indicating vehicular circulation and blue arrows indicating pedestrian circulation. The dark arrows representing Highway 401, which in our analysis, we discovered a lot of big dump trucks are coming through this, and apparently that happens on a regular basis. So part of what we thought about was rerouting that traffic, just a slight deviation, so that this space at least felt more comfortable to be in, because it's very disconcerting to have these large trucks, especially with parallel parking on both sides, kind of blazing through and just killing the ambience of the space. We also looked at the square, the permeable area and non-permeable area being roughly 23,000 and 10,000 square feet respectively, and then the direction of the prevailing winds. Next phase was then to create. Our favorite phase, this is my favorite phase at least. This is the example project that I worked along with the students kind of ahead of them. We call them this Unity Park. We asked the students then to produce a precedent study, something that's relevant to the site that they can pull lessons from, then to generate party or concept sketches pulled from the information. In this instance, in this example, this design is inspired by the patterns that bind being pushed into the ground plane as a paving pattern with pavers, and then the idea of Lake Gaston and Lake Herb being actually etched as a paving pattern slash splash pad, at least in portions, into the paving as well to create equity and bring these natural resources and reflect that in the center, kind of as the heart of the town. And students were then asked to create these illustrative master plans, to hardline these things, to put them to scale, to kind of step through these ideas and help celebrate them, and then generate these perspective images to help fully, really kind of tell the story in 3D and explain kind of what we're doing. And also step back in this particular concept too. Again, you see the Lake Gaston waterfront feature kind of etched into the ground plane, and then the idea of these, the paving material replicating the quilted pattern, but then also the idea of these folks, and I'll step back one, of the environmental justice movement, these folks, these silhouettes of folks laid into the ground as concrete pours to represent the folks that physically laid down to stop these dump trucks from coming in to bring toxic waste, to act as a point of remembrance to, as you walk into the site, to force people to recognize this event and to celebrate the event as a way that it helped connect folks. So again, taking these perspective shots. In this instance, in this particular project, the monument, the base was brought back, the Our Heroes base was brought back. And the idea behind this is that we can shape who our heroes are. That you might bring your grandparent, you bring your grandparent or your mother or your father to these things, you put them on that pedestal and you take a picture, or you bring your kids and your children, you put them on that pedestal. Anybody who you think is your hero, you put on this monument, and you're able to take a picture and commemorate this moment, to expand the narrative and really broaden it really about what our heroes are and what that looks like for us as individuals and collectively as a people, and also to keep that pedestal as a piece of remembrance, to say, well, once upon a time a Confederate statue did rest here, but we broaden the narrative to create this space that is more amazing and helps uplift everybody in the community. And again, that shot of the idea of these silhouettes of the environmental justice movement, to pay homage to that, to walk through and really pull your attention, and to have signage and kiosks to explain these things, so that people are informed about the historic significance of and importance really of the town of Warrington and our national narrative, and still allowing for open space for the many programmed events that occur. I'm also adding movable chairs and umbrellas and seating areas to treat this more of a public park as it functions. And again, some before and after pictures depicting paving pattern and changing the lawnscape into more of a pervious hardscape, but a hardscape that's more accommodating for the events that occur here. So then we step through. We have other students kind of expressing similar designs and looking at their own precedents and kind of stepping through these processes. This idea of this water curtain in this instance in the space. Pollinator gardens, turning the other side into a playground. This student was looking at these different mobile pieces and these fractals coming together, and these puzzle pieces creating basically this walkway that form and flow through the site. And kind of before and afters. Idea of hands holding these connections in these pieces. And then another group kind of stepping through again, following the same cadence, the same sequence. These parties, these ideas about looking at these walls to tell these pictures and pulling that physically into the space, pulling in the Hallowasaponi culture, these emblems and these logos and ideas of bridgings and crossings of water to coming together to unify. And this idea of unification and bringing this space together. In this instance, the student looked at the clock tower and was inspired by expression that was written on the bottom of it. Is it truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? And for her, that really kind of embodied, it was really close to the golden rule, and the world would be a better place with that. And from that, she kind of began sketching this idea of people being these cogs, being connected and creating kind of these cogs together as a system, and was able to manifest that into this design. So we have our illustrative master plan here. And then stepping into our bird's eye kind of axonometric drawing, or hand-drawn perspectives expressing these cogwheels clad into the ground and these circular paths that undulate through the space, and then manifesting it into more photorealistic renderings to express what the space could be, with the addition of pulling the brick in, the softscapes, the addition of different plant materials, and the town's Christmas tree, and these curvilinear paths that kind of sweep around the space. jumping into the water feature that she's pulled in that way. And also a rain garden, a common theme. Activating one of these public spaces in the back, in this instance as a playground on the courthouse property. And then a restaurant across the street. Another individual was looking at the playing with water and the idea of these the lines that you see in the fields, and taking that or these crops and kind of pushing that upon the ground plane and having these breaks that come through, and having a Christmas tree that would reflect it, and also turning this area into an active area of thinking seasonally, and maybe turning it into an ice skating rink in cooler seasons to help activate the space. So kind of tying these spaces in. Quilted Love project. This idea ended up turning into a more of a nautilus type design, spiraling into the space, having some splash pad features in the front, doing a living museum, taking the outline of the county of Warren County, and having information and kind of these kiosks that you can walk through in the space. And pergolas with seating areas and to accommodate folks. In this instance, this student was thinking about turning the whole space into a square, a concept, into one of the quilted pattern squares, and beginning to echo that pattern throughout the town. And this project was based on the idea of a DNA sequence and DNA coming together, and so the form came from to kind of flow through the space with a strong central component. And the idea of kiosk and that DNA and we're all the same, very small variations separate us from each other, and then paying homage to Halawasaponi culture with some of her seating elements and site furnishing features, and trying to diversify the plant material on the space. This student did a really interesting project looking at the different cultural landscapes, are very Afrocentric, looking at the Middle Passage and transatlantic slave trade, and basically taking that and splitting, creating these continents, and the idea that we all come from and derive from Africa, and have this idea of journey and transition across space, and being able to physically see that and walk across it, and still allowing for multi-purpose functions on the space, and then turning that into a rendered master plan, and then beginning to visualize what some of those things look like. These wire sculptures and these pieces that want to bring people to the town, that help the town stand out and create a buzz, to create an energy. Okay, the patterns that bind. In this instance, the idea of the wigwams and the Native American cultures and changing of elevation, the patterns, the quilts were very inspirational. He ended up coming up with a kind of an overture sun sail that's a copy of one of I believe the North Star of the Hope Square, and then also be clad on the bottom to create open space, but something very strong and visual that you would see, similar to what you see in the Bower Park in Greensboro, through the space. And then also doing something with those existing, with the World War II Memorial and the Detective Memorial, to make them more prominent and a little bit cleaner and off the ground on the site. And then kind of moving through this design, flow and water and these different spaces. Water wall, something again unique that's going to pull people in on the corners. This student looked at the plus and minus sign and was manifested into the form of human beings kind of together holding hands, very similar to what Brittany had done before. Different manifestation of that. And this kind of turned into this feature of this person kind of, pulled across the ground, being the head and the body and the legs being pulled. This center water feature that would also be an ice skating rink in cooler months, with the idea of maybe having something also clad into the bottom of the water feature piece. In this instance, the outline of Warren County, and then having some kid areas and some additional seating in the back. just kind of showing some before and afters of that. We have connecting back to nature concept. Kind of this idea of using the quilt square in this pattern, strong axis point connection to the across the street, bringing it through. And then the central idea of the stone and these footsteps going around it. This walking path and this timeless piece of this stone. It's contemplative. And then also in this corner, outline of Lake Gaston. Section, and then lastly this idea of playing with yin and yang and the balance and the scales, especially being connected to the courthouse, and also the idea of using the snake as a really pull from Native American culture, and playing with the idea that people, at least in Western culture, tend to have snakes have negative connotations, and that in other cultures they're revered and they have these wonderful properties of healing, progress, and representations of life, and that it's important to be able to look at things through different eyes. And she manifested this form into this curvilinear space and kind of bringing these different pockets and rooms to the previous Confederate space. In this instance, playing with these kind of transitioning yin and yang pieces phasing through each other and connecting. She ended up going with kind of the serpentine pattern running through, and painting some pictures with pergola and seating area, and also tying back in the quilt patterns that we've been talking about throughout the presentation. And then plantings, perennial plantings, making the space healthier. She also included edible gardens too, so that folks can come in some way and have some sense of community garden there in her design. And we have a Miro board link that folks can look at, and the Miro board link is just going to show you kind of our process going through all the videos and all the work that we've done this semester for the project leading up to that. And then in itself, this presentation feedback link, which is a survey that will allow you to kind of vote on the projects you like the most and provide feedback. Thank you for watching. I hope this was informative and helpful, and we look forward to receiving your feedback so that we can move forward to try to create something beautiful, inspirational, and unifying that broadens the narrative of the town of Warrenton, North Carolina, and acts as an example for other towns across the nation who are going through this similar awareness or enlightenment. Thank you.